So this is Polly Morgan. She shot this film.
Hello.
She's really good.
Thanks, Angus.
You're welcome.
You're biased.
I'm biased.
We've known each other a really long time, so maybe you're biased.
Oh.
Yeah, just a little.
You moved to America, so
I did.
We never get to see you anymore.
That's true. You have to be nice while I'm here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I've got a list of achievements.
No?
No? Yeah, well, no. Polly started as a teenager in the camera department as a runner, working for the very prestigious RSA films, where the bar was set high, I guess, and surrounded by some really good people to show you how it all is.
Yes.
Then you started camera assisting.
I did.
Loader.
Yes.
On film.
Trainee, like runner, trainee, B camera second on film. Loader, central loader, then B camera second.
And now DP. There we go.
And now
so
DP.
that's all.
That was quick and easy.
But then, yeah, and thank you very much. Any questions? Then after a while, you decided to go to film school.
I did.
And you'd been loading, what, for 5 or 6 years?
Yes.
And
Yes.
the AFI called, or were you sort of pushed that way?
So the main cameraman that I was assisting was someone called Harris Sambalukas. And Harris Sambalukas had gone to AFI. And when he was at AFI, he had found mentorship through Conrad Hall. And then he had, had that amazing experience in LA, and then he'd come back to London. And I met him as a camera trainee, or even as a runner, on one of his first movies called Spivs. And I told him I was a runner, and he said, well, come and work for free in the camera department anytime you want, which I did. And then he was sort of the person that kind of helped train me up, or his crew trained me up to be a camera assistant. And after a while, he saw that I was shooting a lot, or as much as I could at the time, trying to meet people that wanted to have someone shoot for them. It was all film, how I could save up to process the negative. And he said, listen, I'm seeing you do this. You should go to film school, because otherwise you're going to be 50 by the time you start shooting. I had always had this sort of love for Americana. I'd read all the stories and the books I had read when I was a teenager, and I had loved the filmmakers coming out of the States. So it kind of felt like a natural transition to just go to study in America. And so I applied the first time to go, and I got in, but I couldn't afford to go because it was, or it is, I don't know, it's probably more now. It's like $120,000 to study there for 2 years. And I had applied for a Fulbright scholarship, and I didn't get it. And then 2 years later, I was like, I really think I should be there. So I reapplied for the Fulbright, and I got it. And then that enabled me to go and help pay to study.
That was rather cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Somebody could see what was coming. And and after that, you came out and you started shooting, and
Yes.
you did lots of seriously low budget films.
I did. I mean, I was kind of like Harris interned with Conrad Hall. I was an intern with Wally Pfister on Inception. In between my first and second year at school, I worked on Inception here and in Europe, Africa, and in Canada, which taught me a lot about lighting. And then, I started shooting. My first year out of AFI, I shot 4 movies. The first one being, I think, a budget of $17,000 that we shot in a week. And then the fourth one being, I think, a budget of $250,000, which I found on Mandy.com. Yeah.
Very good.
Good old Mandy.com, yeah.
Gosh, I think I'm still on it. Still don't get any calls. But I think one of the cool things about that process is when you're studying to go off and work with somebody like Wally on a film like Inception. Yeah. All of a sudden you're as a loader, yes. you're too busy doing your job to actually see where to put where the lights should go.
Yeah, when I was a loader and a second, I thought that everyone could see how difficult my job was and how busy I was. And then when I started DPing, I was like, oh, no one even sees the second AC. You know, they're so busy, but everyone's so concerned with their job that they don't really notice how hard everybody else is working. But my experience with Wally was not only did I get his breakfast and look after his staff and all that kind of menial stuff, but I would do a lighting diagram for him for every single set. And then I would, find out what the stop was, what the gel was, where the lights were at. And I would just build this Bible for him. And I was able to kind of start predicting how he would light a scene, which was amazing because he always lit everything very simply. And then he always knew where to put the camera in relation to the light. And I think it was just an amazing learning experience, not only to see how he lit quickly and where to put the camera, but also his relationship with Christopher Nolan and, how they kind of interacted in such a, intimate way.
It's such a special role to be able to play.
Yeah.
And I think, amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
And so after that was then you did your micros, and then you started doing some TV.
Yes, I did, after the four features in my first year, which were tiny, I did a $1.2 million movie that went to Sundance and got me an agent. And then I did another indie. And then, honestly, the work kind of dried up, and it was very difficult for me to shoot. I didn't do commercials. No one would give me a commercial. I was just a narrative DP. And so I started coming back to the UK because the UK, I managed to get an agent here, and they were like, oh, you live in America? Wow, how cool. And then I managed to book Call the Midwife. And then I did Call the Midwife, and then I did a couple more BBC dramas. But it was very challenging, and I know we'll talk about this, but it became very challenging for me to have any kind of balanced life because I was coming to England to shoot BBC dramas, and I was mainly up in Manchester living in a hotel. So I wasn't with my friends or my family here. And then I would go back to the States where I was based, and then I would do an independent movie, and I would be in Savannah or I would be in New York, and I wasn't even working in LA. So, in my early 30s, I was finding that I was just kind of bouncing about all over the place, living in a suitcase for years, not really being able to, invest in my relationships with my friends or even to try and find any kind of life partner. So after doing that for a while, I just kind of had to make a choice of, do I settle back in the UK or do I just really try and make a go of it in the States? And I decided the States just because it was kind of where I had worked so hard to get a visa and to kind of establish myself there somewhat. So I went back there, and then after about a year, I managed to book my first cable TV show, which was this TV show called Legion.
I remember reading those scripts.
Yeah. Yes.
And then things steadily progressed, and by 2016, and I'm not sure which order this happened in, you got a BSc.
Yes.
And you also got named as Variety's top 10 cinematographers to watch. I'm assuming it's because you got your BSc. Yeah.
Of course, it was definitely
yes,
all about the BSc.
In that order.
It was.
We're not a reactive organisation.
No, absolutely not. I think that, I went back to America and I was shooting independent movies again. And I think, I had come and spent some time in the UK, and I had met some people and built some relationships here. And somebody said, they would love to nominate me for BSc membership. And then some other people kind of joined in and said they would like to do that too. So that was obviously sort of a very, very exciting time for me. And then at the same time, because I somehow feel that all the good things in life always happen together and then all the bad things in life happen together. But I then booked Legion, which enabled me to work on this incredibly inventive and freeing show. And meeting Noah Hawley, the showrunner, that then asked me to shoot his directorial debut, which was Lucy in the Sky with Natalie Portman, and my first studio movie, which then enabled me to kind of get into that studio system and, start the run of studio movies.
And you sure did.
I did.
And in that period, you also got your ASC,
yes.
which,
Yes.
From strength to strength.
Yeah.
And then from Lucy in the Sky to Quiet Place.
Yes.
And amazing. And then Where the Crawdads Sing.
Yes.
And then this thing.
Yes.
Or that thing.
Yeah.
And so with The Woman King,
yeah.
I mean, you know, I wrote something here, then I thought I'd better change it. How did they find you? And then I said, what do you think they liked about their work? I'm going to stop reading these questions quite like that. But.
Well, I mean, I'll just tell you that, so I did Lucy in the Sky because of my relationship with Noah Hawley. And then I remember I had my first baby. Just to fill you guys in, I had my first baby, and when my baby was 6 days old, my husband had to leave town for 6 weeks. And so I was alone with this baby, and it was the hardest thing I ever had to do because I had to figure it all out on my own. And then at about 4 weeks in, the Lucy in the Sky trailer came out, and all of a sudden, my phone started ringing, agents were calling, everyone was excited. They're like, wow, look at this trailer looks incredible. And then I got a call from my agent saying, oh, there's a Quiet Place 2, and I hadn't seen a Quiet Place 1, and they were like, they want to meet you tonight. And I was like, I can't meet tonight. I'm like trying to figure out motherhood. I can meet tomorrow. So that night when I got my baby to sleep, I tried to watch the movie, which was terrifying because there's a baby floating around in a box, and you know, it's like, as a new mother, it's very traumatic. And to try and read the script. And then at lunchtime the next day, I had a call with John Krasinski on the phone. And the baby was crying the whole time, my daughter. And I called up my agent afterwards, and I was like, that went so bad. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm not quite sure what happened, but I was so distracted. And then a couple hours later, she called, and she said, you got the job. And I was like, oh, okay. And then at 8 weeks, we had to move to Buffalo to shoot the movie. And then after that movie, you know, when Where the Crawdads Sing came out, the producers were like, no, we don't know Polly. We've only seen her Quiet Place 2 movie. It's not really the right tone. And I somehow found out the email address of the director, and I wrote her an email, and I told her how much I loved the book and how she had to meet with me. And so I fought so hard to get that movie. And then when I met Gina on The Woman King, to go back to your question, I got sent the script. It was incredible. It was just such a beautiful script to read. That I met with Gina, and then I found out a few weeks later that she gave the job to somebody else, this is kind of like, no one really knows this. But I found out I didn't get the job, and I was so upset. And then I found out a few weeks after that the deal with the DP that she wanted had fallen through. And so she hadn't seen what she wanted to see from her DP in the work that I had done, and so I had to cut together a reel of Where the Crawdads Sing to show her a different sort of style to my work. And luckily, both movies were Sony Pictures, so they enabled me to do that. And then when I showed her Where the Crawdads Sing, and then I had another phone call with her, she then offered me the job.
Amazing. I mean,
yeah.
And so Sony obviously were sort of supporting your thing by allowing you that footage.
They were.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously you like the script enough to go to all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing, you know, even from sort of like reading about Nanisca rising up from the grasses. And then, you know, the sort of the combination of all the action, and then, you know, that combined with the drama and the emotionality of the script. I think it was just such a powerful script to read, and really just a very exciting project for a DP.
And so, along with cutting a custom reel, I mean, obviously, what were other aspects of your pitching process?
I mean, I made sort of in the weekends of trying to shoot Where the Crawdads Sing, I put together a pitch deck, which was difficult because I really didn't have any references to pull that would show how I intended to shoot the movie. But I did pull together just some photography and some art, just to sort of talk about like how I saw kind of the streets and the environment as a whole, and color and light, and just really to use them as talking points. And you know, when I first met with Gina, she sort of presented a lookbook to me, which was kind of broad, but it was sort of basically based on the fact that this is a historical epic, and she wanted to have, you know, beautiful flares and strong color and all of that stuff. So we both kind of talked about our various images, and then just got on, I suppose.
I think what I found quite interesting was I didn't realise that you were still shooting where the crawdads sing.
Yes.
And so therefore the footage you were pulling was kind of rushes.
Yes. No, they were dailies. They were
Dailies, yeah.
they were dailies.
And you had your DIT just...
I actually had the editor. The editor helped me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, but it was very rough. It was...
Well, that's cool.
Right? It was 3 minutes. Yeah.
There we go. 3 minutes that took you... kept you busy for the next 6 months.
7.5 months.
7.5 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you look at the film now, can you see your references, your pitch, your vision? Has it survived the process? Has it made it through? I mean, obviously these things evolve from that when you first read the script. You have these magnificent ideas that kind of then evolve. Yeah, they evolve.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. I think they were kind of weirdly somewhat arbitrary. They were just kind of... I found it difficult to find very specific references that could help convey what I would feel and think when I read the script. Mm-hmm. I think it's that thing, and obviously nowadays we're so blessed with sort of websites like ShotDeck. But I think, I have started to really, when I get a script or I want to meet on a project, like to really hone in on pulling images and sort of like, learning how to do that in the way that will really help me convey to the director how I see it and how we think we should approach it. And I think it's taken me a long time to really sort of figure out that methodology. Mm-hmm. But this one was just so difficult because, it was just unique. There was nothing really that had been done like this before, so to speak. And so, yes and no.
So I kind of guess it's that thing, you get a real gut feeling from the script, and in that moment something comes to it, and then you're going to develop the look with the director.
Yes.
And so actually it's like get the job.
Yes, get the job.
Just get the job.
Yes.
And then everything else really comes, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I really, as a historical epic and having loved the sort of the handful of historical epics that we all know and love, I wanted to do homage to that genre, and I wanted it to be a movie that could stand the test of time and be classically shot, with anamorphic lenses, widescreen, I wanted to kind of do justice to the heritage of these people and all of that stuff. But I think that, we had this conversation about how clean stuff can be. And I think as a Sony picture, or even when I think about Where the Crawdads Sing, always think things should be dirtier and more real and lived in if we're trying to tell a story of someone that has lived a life, or if we really want to take a viewer somewhere and get them to invest in the story. So, I think a lot of my references had smoke and dust and backlight, and it had this kind of feeling of, it wasn't necessarily an exact reference, but it had this kind of feel that I was going to go for to kind of introduce special effects and to sort of backlight and sidelight and light with firelight and all of that type of stuff, so that hopefully those references and the way that I would speak about them would convey an idea to Gina.
And therefore, so once you start getting into prep, this stuff then starts becoming sort of more tangible. And you think, so rather than just this idea that you're presenting, you then start looking at the reality of it all. And so, I mean, how long was the schedule for the film?
Well, I think it started off being, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks prep and then a 4 and 5 week shoot. Something, around there.
Started that way.
It started that way, and, we were in South Africa, which was, the birthplace of Omicron. So it just happened that we were prepping, we started shooting, we were shooting for maybe 2-3 weeks, and then all of a sudden one day 65% of the crew tested positive.
So halfway through the shoot at this stage?
Well, halfway through, I guess, my time in Africa. But only 3 weeks into the shoot. And actually, it was a blessing because even though the whole production shut down, I think we were always chasing our tail, and especially because when we started shooting on location. We shot the opening battle sequence, we shot the big location work, the farmhouse that was built on location in the north part of the country. And once we came back from the northern part of the country on location, we came to sort of the beach, and we did the end sort of, battle on the beach. We did them arriving on the beach, and we did sort of them jumping off the wall into the water. And all of that work was, it's a long travel time from Cape Town, and it was just very exhausting work to shoot. And I think we were spent, like in South Africa, kind of like England, maybe they're not unions to take care of people. So we were working 6-day weeks. We were working long hours. People weren't getting their turnaround. People were exhausted.
And I think I seem to remember you saying you were also working Sundays, prepping.
Yes. So, we were shooting 6-day weeks, and then, sort of the approach of the director is she likes to prep and prepare for the next week ahead at the weekend, which is difficult when you're working a 6-day week, because that means you have to work on your 7th day.
And you have 2 children.
And I had a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old at the time. Yeah. So, it was, there were times when I went to work and I'd slept for maybe like 2 hours on and off throughout the night. But
we can get into the work-life
we'll
balance.
get into that, yeah, for sure.
And so, for the prep side of this, getting into all this, what does prep look like for you?
This was the first time that I'd ever worked with a second unit. Usually when I was doing stuff, I would usually send out my B camera as a splinter unit and kind of organize that as a small thing. But to work with a second unit and really kind of organizing, sharing the gear, and, being very specific about what we needed them to shoot and how we wanted them to shoot it. But also just dealing with the scale of something like this, because not only was the first couple of weeks in the north of the country a logistical challenge, because there really was nothing there. So we had to bring every single person from the background to the crew, but every single cable, power source, every single thing up there, because we were in the middle of a game reserve. It was just sort of the scale of like massive rigging crews always being one step ahead, schedules changing, making sure that we were prepared for the sort of the day in hand. And I think that when we work with directors, every director is different, and we spent quite a bit of time in our prep storyboarding scenes in detail. So we would storyboard certain sequences, and then they wouldn't be right, so we would have to give notes and go back and forth, and that took up a huge chunk of our prep time. And so there was lots of stuff that needed to be talked about that actually wasn't talked about in the 9 weeks of prep. So when Omicron happened and we had an extra 3 weeks, we were able to delve into all of that material that we hadn't really had the opportunity to look at. But my prep, it deals with trying to figure out, Gina's approach, and, going to stunt rehearsals and figuring out how to shoot battle sequences, which is something I'd never done before. Doing VR goggles and going to 3D builds of these environments that didn't exist. And going to sort of lighting demos with the set decorators and figuring out, the fire sort of element of it all, and so many things, really. And
so with the prep thing, do you sound like you're sort of quite an efficient prep person? You make notes and you write things down, and you
yes.
Do you look at them again?
No, it's funny, I've got into this habit, and I'm doing it now, where I make a book. And my book for the movie is, I create this Google Doc. And on the Google Doc, I make sure that on this one document, I put my lighting approach, the special effects, the visual effects, the shot list, if there is one, the storyboards, the visual references, and I just have it on my phone because it's a Google Doc. So then I can just bring it up and I can show someone this is the reference for the scene, or these are the storyboards for the scene. And for me, I'm dyslexic, and I've always been a very visual person, and I have always found success in the way that I can prep something and see it on the page. Mm-hmm. And so, the shot list and all that stuff, that kind of goes out the window. I never look at that again. But the references, or a way to communicate with someone about like the thickness of the smoke, or, you know, the lighting, or the operating and the framing of a shot, or something like that. Like, it's very beneficial for me to have it all in one place and use it as a tool of communication.
And speaking of the framing of the shot, I think how many cameras did you have on permanently?
So we always had 3 cameras.
Usually always shooting?
Always shooting, for the most part.
You operating?
I operated sometimes.
Okay.
And then, you know, sometimes we'd have 5. And it's funny because having come from Legion, on Legion, I kind of had one of my first experience working with a camera operator and not operating myself. And that experience was with an operator called Mitch Dubin. And Mitch Dubin is Steven Spielberg's operator. And Mitch is like the most amazing camera operator you will ever encounter. He's incredibly talented, but what's difficult for a DP is he says that he works for the director. And so it's a very unique experience that I've fought very hard against. And I love Mitch, and I think he loves me now too, but we've worked together for a long time.
Now.
Yes, and you know, I have always been of the mindset that as a DP, I'm very much involved with the camera movement, the lens choice, the framing of the shot, all of that stuff I'm very deeply involved with, as well as the lighting. And Mitch is just kind of, his experience is, oh, I'm just going to communicate directly with the director. And, you know, we worked on 2 seasons of Legion together, and we did Lucy in the Sky together. And then I asked him to do Where the Crawdads Sing. And Where the Crawdads Sing, you know, Mitch is an operator. He doesn't really like to work with 2 cameras. He likes to work with a single camera, and we move the camera a lot. And he's a talented, skilled craftsman that when you come up with an idea of a shot, he can really execute it in like a take. So it's incredibly freeing creatively as a cinematographer. And when I spoke to Gina about The Woman King, she was like, I hear you only like to shoot with 1 camera. And I was like, well, I mean, what DP doesn't? But she's like, I like to shoot with multiple cameras. And so for this movie, again, we shot it in 58 days, or maybe it's 62. It's somewhere around there, with like main unit becoming second unit at the end. But we were really strapped for time, like doing massive sequences in the morning and then massive sequences in the afternoon, and doing 10-hour days. So, and especially with an ensemble female cast, trying to get them out the trailers in the morning was also frustrating. So, you know, like we had to use multiple cameras. And so for me, it was just a very different experience, and a kind of, you know, like, how do I get what I need from each camera? How do I try to keep it exciting and not too static? But I will say, like, what was wonderful is Gina did sit with me, and we all sat there and communicated together, rather than necessarily her being on set and then me having to run back and forth. Because I think with digital capture, you know, it's this sort of, this thing, if you're not operating the camera as a DP, you don't want to be stuck in the DIT tent because you're out of the conversation. So, you know, I'm just sort of always making sure I'm on set, but I'm always running as quickly as I can to the DIT just to check it and observe it. But, you know, obviously wanting to be there and not miss out on those creative chats.
And so did you carry on with the Mitch style of letting operators kind of, or did you actually conquer Mitch's? After doing a few projects with him,
yes,
he started listening to you.
Yes. So after doing the first season of Legion, and then Lucy in the Sky, and then the second season of Legion, Mitch's perception, I think, of me was different, and he kind of, I think, respected the fact that I want to be very much involved. Like, that's just the way that I think my job is.
And so with this. You're back.
Well, this, you know, it was interesting because so Mitch was doing the Fabelmans, and the B camera operator on the Fabelmans was Colin Anderson, who is a fantastic, amazing operator, A camera operator in his own right.
I focus pulled.
Yeah, lovely man, and he's South African, and so, you know, Mitch said to me, "Oh, I think Colin would be interested in coming to South Africa with you." Mm-hmm. So Colin came, but he said to me, I'd love to come, but the caveat is I have to leave after Christmas to do a J.J. Abrams movie. And I was like, okay, cool, doesn't matter. Like, come, let's start off the movie, let's set the tone. And then Omicron struck, and we lost Colin after like 2.5 weeks. And I think that Colin is a different kind of operator than Mitch, in that Colin is very much a like, how do you want to do it? you know, rather than it being like a conversation where Mitch is like, this is how I think we should do it. And I say, no, Mitch, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to do it like this. And then him saying, oh, okay. Colin was the kind of operator that he was just like, how do you see it? What do you want to do? And would be just, it's just a different kind of mentality. And then, you know, he kind of led the charge for the camera department, and then I inherited just the B camera operator became the A camera operator, and the C camera operator became the B, and then I was able to bring in a female to shoot the C camera. But they were amazing. Like the South African crew are phenomenal, basically. Yeah.
And, well, that's good.
Yeah, thank God.
And, you know, speaking of South African crew, you know, so your lighting team, was that all, did you bring a gaffer with you, or did you pick up your
No,
gaffer
I
with you?
didn't bring a gaffer with me, and I actually owe huge kudos to Mark Patton, BSC, because he had finished shooting Raised by Wolves 2 there, and he introduced me to his crew. And, you know, it was interesting for me coming from America because I was very much used to a different way of dividing up the lighting department between the electricians and the grips. And so it was my first kind of foray into the British side of things, where the gaffer takes care of, you know, softening and cutting the light. And I met the most incredible gaffer, Oliver Wilter, a really, really lovely man, very, very talented, the son of a gaffer, loves to light, and was just really brilliant. And
so tell me about the approach you took, lighting-wise, in terms of, because, you know, it's sunny.
Yes.
And
yes.
bright.
Yes.
And windy.
Yes.
And to control that sun, you need big things that
Huge
don't
things.
like wind. And,
yes. Yes. I mean, I think that Where the Crawdads Sing happened to be an amazing, like, movie to shoot before this, because it takes place in the wilds of Louisiana on the swamps. There's a lot of day exterior work. There's some night exterior work, but a lot of work out in the wilderness, and then also on boats where I couldn't control the light. And I think as someone who is an image maker, you know, and I'm trying to maybe fight against this a little bit as I keep working, but I do like things to be kind of perfect and very pretty and just well modeled and controlled. And I think I kind of was learning how to handle all that, kind of the difference between being forced to be in a situation where you couldn't control it and then having an aesthetic where you like to control it. I kind of went up against that on Where the Crawdads Sing. And then on The Woman King, I had 3 days off between wrapping and starting the next movie. And so when I went on the scout, I was very much like, I kind of just knew inherently what I needed to do.
It was just like having a weekend off.
Yeah, it was. It was like having a long weekend off. And so, you know, I think the night work, I mean, everything was just massive. It was just, you know, massive sets, massive expanse of, you know, countryside at nighttime.
And not a massive amount of time.
Not a massive amount of time. And also not a massive amount of money. You know, this is not a $100 million movie. This is a $50 million movie. And, you know, the approach that we took was at nighttime, we would just ring these environments with these cranes. And we built soft boxes of various sizes, which we called moon boxes. And we would put these Helios lights, which are like LED dinos. And they were, you know, intensity controllable, color controllable. And, you know, every time we turned around with the camera, we would be like, okay, bring this one up, take this one out, bring this, you know, we would just, everything was, you know, LED, so we could move very quickly and be flexible. And then in the daylight, you know, sometimes I just had to let it be what it was. And sometimes I was able to control it, especially if the story called for it, because sometimes I just wanted it to be raw. And so we would have these big diffusion frames overhead, but then we would also need to bounce back light onto the actors in the day, and also bounce back a neutral light and not like the red bounce from the earth, because the environment of Dahomey historically was this red earth that we actually had to create a mine to dig for this earth so we could create the environment. But, you know, when you started to see the bounce off the red earth on, you know, darker skin tones, it's really becomes very muddy very quickly. It's like there's nothing there. So we just had, you know, 20 by 20 ultra bounces on Manitos that would just drive around with us in the day to just reflect neutral light back.
Gosh, and you had some really, there was quite a few scenes set at dusk. And,
Yes.
we all know about dusk.
Yes.
Oh, it's gone.
Yeah. Especially in South Africa in the summer where it's like the sun rises and it goes whoop, and then it sets and it just goes straight down. But the dusk scenes, weirdly, they seem so simple in the movie. And they really were the hardest thing that we did, which was, we would have these massive construction cranes and we would have 60 by 60s. The first time I did it, I did like a 60 by 60. They didn't do grey grid cloth, so I did a 60 by 60 diffusion, and then I would put a double net and a single net underneath. And then I would like kind of puzzle them together so they would overlap and then take out all of the direct light on the set. And not only would I have those massive cranes, but then I would have Manitous also on the side just trying to block out because, there's always just the sunlight kind of peeking in the background and you just had to cut it all away. And then as I got further along the shoot, I just lost that approach and I just did 60 by 60 solids overhead. And then I just tried to take out the sun completely. And we had some hairy moments where, the wind would pick up. It's very windy in South Africa in the summer, and a rag would rip, and then it became a sail, and the sort of crane lifted off the ground, and we all had to evacuate. So it was tricky. It was my fault. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Just let it be sunny.
I know. That would be the easiest thing to do, yeah.
And with SFX, obviously in the big battle sequence you use a lot of smoke, which
Yes.
helps with time of, allowing you to shoot all day.
Yes.
Ish.
Yes. I mean, that for me, when I read the script, was the most intimidating scene of the movie, this massive battle sequence. And when I first read it, the Agoji actually broke down a dam at night, and then in dawn, the whole encampment was flooded. And then that became just like so unachievable, like just logistically and budgetary to try and shoot within like a muddy swamp. And so, the new conceit was that they would set the encampment on fire with the palm oil, which is kind of a theme throughout the film. And, I looked at sort of Braveheart and the beautiful work that Adam Arkampor did on Macbeth. I was like, this is great. This is super atmospheric, and it can help me with, I'm not going to be able to control the light because it's action and we're all over the place. So I'm going to, they set the encampment on fire, we'll motivate it and use smoke. And it was even more apparent that it was going to work because in Omicron, all our background numbers got cut by a third. So we really had no stunt extras in the battleground, and we were in this vast space, and it was kind of, when we're shooting it, it was a bit pathetic because there was just a few people fighting, and, we were just trying to create this huge feeling of this epic battle. But, again, it wasn't Scotland. It was South Africa in the summer. It was high sun. It was incredibly windy. And smoke is such a changeable beast. So it would be really heavy. Like the first day we shot it, I got all the notes from the studio saying, we hate the smoke, no more smoke. And I was like, no, we're doing the smoke. Got to do the smoke. And then Gina was like, okay, we can do the smoke, but you have to make it much lighter than it is. And then the editor was calling saying, oh, there's this amazing action moment, and then the smoke comes in and I can't use it because it's too heavy and I can't see anything. And I was like, okay. But I was just determined to use the smoke. And it was this thing where we were on set and tensions were high and the wind came in and the smoke was too thick. And I was just like, wait, okay, shoot. And then the wind would come in and then we'd have to cut. And so it was frustrating for Gina, it was frustrating for everybody, but I really just had to like hold my ground and say, we have to just make this work. And I think also for second unit, I had to really say to them, because they did 5 days, we did 5 days, they did 5 days, which actually is no time at all to shoot a huge battle sequence, 10 days. And, sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. And actually in the movie, some of the scenes have had to have visual effects smoke put in, which does horrible things to color and contrast, and it just looks bad. But I think, when I shot Where the Crawdads Sing, when I signed up to do that movie, I was going to do a different movie in my mind. And then it became clear that it was going to be a very commercial movie, and that Kaya was going to be beautiful and well kept and not be dirty, and the language had to be, we couldn't really do silhouettes or anything too bold, and I had to change my shooting style to kind of fit with the studio's idea of what the movie should be. And so when I was doing The Woman King, having had that experience, I was like, it's not too smoky, it's not too dark. I'm just going to try and stand my ground and just keep going.
And so by the time, I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
But by the time, you've done the shoot, you've wrapped, you've gone home.
Yes.
You start seeing the first cuts coming in. You start seeing, whether your vision has made it through.
Yes.
As the cinematographer, it's not, our vision isn't always taken into account.
No, never.
And then I've said, did your film, the film you made, did it survive the edit?
Yeah, I think that Terry, the editor, she did a really phenomenal job, actually. She probably made the movie look better than, it could have.
No, you saved time. Did you do those magnificent cinematographers' long establishing shots that, as it gets cut from this big crane shot that comes down, it's just like...
Yes, like the opening battle we did, which was very intense. Like we did these long choreographed one-ers, like Gina and I in prep, when we looked at battle sequences that had been shot, when we looked at The Revenant, we were like, how can we make this feel different? Like we don't have stunt performers. These actors are doing their own stunts. So what should we do to have a fresh approach? Like we all want to do something different that's not been done before. So I was like, okay, well, let's do long takes. Let's, be wide and close and do these long developing takes, and we can be on one character and we can move off that character to another, and we can really just take the viewer and put them in. And that's what we did. That's how we shot the opening night battle. And it was very complicated because, we were like panning around with the camera, and we were like bringing lights up on the dimmer and down on the dimmer with the dimmer board, and, making sure that everything was backlit and not front lit. And it was this massive choreographed dance. And then I watched that sequence and it's just cut. So, I think it's interesting, isn't it? As a cinematographer, you spend a long time prepping a movie, and then you have to hand that over to the editor and the director, and it becomes something different.
Films are made numerous times.
Yes.
In the original idea, then the writer makes another film, then you shoot it becomes another film, then the editor makes another film, then the studio comes in and makes another film.
Yes. Yes.
And so, just to finish off this, and before we go out, what's your takeaway from this particular?
I think that the first cut I saw was over 3 hours, and I loved. No, it was 2 hours 50, and I loved it. It was brilliant. And then as a Sony movies, they kind of have to be 2 hours. And so where the Crawdad Sing became 2 hours, and this became the two hours, and it was kind of shocking to me. And kind of devastating too, because my historical epic experience was they're all like 2.5 hours or longer. But really, now I see it, I think what I'm sad about is the trainees. We had these sort of like developing relationship scene where those young women kind of grow and bond together. But I think ultimately you don't necessarily miss that. But my takeaway is, I think these days, what's interesting as DPs is we shoot a movie. If it's for theatrical, we then go and we spend however many hours doing a DI. And we spend the time in the DI in a P3 color space for theatrical distribution. And then they're like, okay, well, let's do the HDR pass. You have a day to do that. And we want the nits to be sitting. We want them to be bright. We want to sell this movie, the HDR version, as a different version, right? We want to make money on this. And where the Crawdads Sing, my nits, let's just say that the SDR, the 709 home deliverable is the peak highlights sit at 100. My HDR the highlights sat at 150. Everything was very similar. Like from the theatrical version to the home version, you're watching the same movie. And when I did the DI for this, I worked with a different colorist. I worked with the colorist Gina had worked with before. And there was some differences in opinion of where the highlights should sit for the HDR. And for me, the HDR version sits too high, it's too bright. And it makes me sad because when I watch it, it feels overly lit. And I still think, obviously, everyone that worked on this movie has done a really great job, and we've made a good movie, and that's rare because it's difficult sometimes for everyone to like pull it all off together. But I think just at the end, I think, maybe it's the artist in me that I can't always be really proud of my work, but I wish that maybe the final process had been slightly different.
Well, at least everybody saw it the
They
way you
did.
wanted it
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
And so, if this comes again, would you do your HDR first?
I mean, I think
Or
if
would
it's a
you just
theatrical,
get-
I would still do the P3 first, but I think that I would just be more strict, or just be like, I want my nit depth or level or however it's described to sit not more than SDR.
Yeah.
I want it to be 150. I don't think that it should suddenly be a different version of the movie that's out there forever, where it's like suddenly so much brighter.
In my prep, I do all that bit in my prep.
Yes.
Fight those battles very early on. But
Yes.
Anyway, so shall we ask some questions? Look, there's a Nick Nolan hand up, and Nick is, for the microphone is there. Somebody else after Nick?
Shall I get it?
Here we go, Nick.
There we go.
Is there another question after
Yeah,
Nick, just for another hand for the mic to get to? Anyway, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hi there. Great, wonderful work. Thank you. I was kind of think I noticed something about the way violence was used or seen.
Yes.
It's a kind of script which I could never have done because I kind of really don't like violence, and I think you had to be very brave to go there. But can you tell us, was there much conversation about how that would be covered in the storytelling, in the shooting styles?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a boring answer, but the answer is as a oh gosh, it's a boring answer, but as a product, it's something that we couldn't have an R-rated movie or an 18-rated movie because it's inaccessible to a lot of people. So we had to make sure that the violence wasn't gratuitous so that more people could go to the theatre to watch it. Yeah, and but I also think it's that thing where, as a movie like this, one of the things I'm proudest of this movie is when I read about or am in presence of people reacting to it, especially young women of colour, where they haven't seen themselves represented on the big screen before, that they feel emotional and they're like so excited that they see themselves up on the big screen and they're so strong and they're vulnerable and they're like just there for each other. And there's so many things that is really, giving young people motivation and courage and changing things for them. And so it is that thing that we never wanted to have blood being splattered on the lens. I'm not kind of someone that likes violence in a movie. So how do we make a product really that can reach a broad audience and kind of get across? Because these women were real, and these women cut off men's heads. They were vicious. Like, you actually do the research on these incredible warriors, and they did sharpen their fingernails. They did poke out eyeballs. They were really like hardcore. But I don't think we needed to go there. It was just kind of, to kind of get that idea across that they really could hold their own, and
And that came across, I think, very much. There were some very goose pimply moments, as that makes you sort of just shiver a little bit and go,
Yeah. Oh,
lump in throat moments. It's great.
Yeah.
There was another question.
What I really
Yes.
I took away from it, that there was a lot of violence, but it was never gratuitous.
Yes.
But you knew it was there.
Yes.
And I thought that was really, really well done.
Thanks, Nick.
Hi, Polly. I'm Ness. Nice to meet you. Thank
Hi.
you for coming. Thank you for the film. It was really great to watch. I wanted to ask you a slightly more personal thing about, you're talking about working 6 days and working on a Sunday as well. That's how your director likes to work. Obviously, you've done back-to-back projects. Like, you must be exhausted. And how do you manage your energy? And like, when do you decide to say, no, actually, I need to rest on my 7th day because I'm not going to be able to bring it next week if I'm working the whole time? Like, what is your, where do you draw the line, and how do you manage like taking these jobs, especially with 2 kids? Like,
Well, I mean, I will say that I'm not sure where I find the energy. Somehow it's there. But I do have, very luckily, a kind of relationship with my husband that he's also self-employed and he's very supportive. And, you know, when I talked to him about going to Africa straight after going to Louisiana, he was just like, yeah, if this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. And I think at the moment it is simple because my kids are not at school. I think that, you know, just talking to Angus about this before, like, I wanted to do this career forever, like ever since I was a teenager. So my whole life has been dedicated to this. And it just so happened when I got Lucy in the Sky, I also was pregnant. And I think, of course, things always come together. But when I was younger, in my 20s and early 30s, I think my experience of working, I understood that, or I thought that I knew that I couldn't have it all. And I think what I started to see and then what I started to do was I could have it all. I could be a wife and a mother, and I could also be a DP. And I think that is it was like a revelation to me because I never thought that that was possible for like over 10 years. And so as the opportunities came, you know, I think it's that pressure, honestly, of like being exhausted all the time, but when I'm at work, not thinking I'm quite there enough and feeling guilty. And then when I'm at home, trying to be super mum, but feeling guilty because I'm not there all the time. And I think I've just kind of like accepted that. And I just do my best. And I think, you know, hopefully my kids are young enough that maybe they won't be judging me too much at the moment, or, you know, honestly, I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. And I'm just, you know, I'm just grateful to be doing the work and grateful that I have the kids and the family. And, you know, if I'm really, really tired, then maybe that's a small price to pay. Yeah.
So will you be you're now in London starting another project.
Yeah.
You had your first holiday which didn't sound very holiday-ish.
Yes.
And then how long? You're in London until April?
Yeah, so basically what happened was, you know, I got back from South Africa, did the DI for Where the Crawdads Sing, and then my husband was like, he had written a movie, he wanted to direct his first movie, so I was like, great, let's go and shoot it, sort of for $1.5 million. Then I got back and I did the DI for The Woman King, and I was like, I'm going to take some time off. So I took from September off, and then I was just saying no to stuff because I had this family holiday booked, the first one we were going to go on, end of November. And then I got sent the script for the Amy Winehouse biopic just before the holiday. And it was just great. And so I said yes. And so then I went on my holiday and I had to like find somewhere to live in London, find a nanny in London, find a crew in London. And then it just wasn't really the holiday that I thought. And then I came here alone without my husband, and he's coming on Saturday, but I've got the 2 kids. So it just, you know, you just keep doing it.
But there's another, I think we should make sure you have a holiday in May.
I think, based on your advice, I think in April I'm going to go to Italy. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
I think I'm not really watching the time anymore, but is there, if we have another question, and then we might go to the bar.
Yeah, let's go to the bar.
There we go. That's a vote. The boss has spoken.
There we go.
Polly Morgan, everybody.
Thank you.